For all. Please join us for a moment of silence. Thank you. Starting off with citizen concerns. First item on the agenda. All right, seeing none, we'll move on to the approval of the agenda. I'll move that. Second. Motion by Raddick, second by Ung. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, passes 5-0. All right, moving on to the consent agenda. Items 3 through 6 constitute a consent agenda, routine action items to be considered by one motion. Items pass unanimously unless a separate vote is requested by a board member. Item 3, approval of the minutes of the August 13th, 2019 meeting. Item 4, approval of claims. Item 5, from Board Administration, approval of tax suspension for resolution for BS. 6A, approval of memorandum of personnel transactions. 6B, authorization to initiate hiring process. And 6C, approval of retiree request to remain on county health and dental insurance plan. I will move the consent agenda.
Second.
I'll go motion by Raddick, second by DeWitt. Any discussion on that? All those in favor say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? All right, that passes 5-0. Moving on to 7A from Kenny and Building Services. Set bid opening date of September 10th, 2019 at 2:30 p.m. in the Board of Supervisors office, and authorize County Auditor's Office to open competitive bid submissions at that time for the Trosper Hoyt Juvenile Detention Kitchen project.
Kenny Schmidt's Building Services. Again, this is to set the open and receive and award dates for the Trosper Hoyt Juvenile Detention Kitchen project. We also set a bid opening date of September 10th, 2019 at 2:30 p.m. and authorize County Auditor's Office to open the competitive bid submissions at that time. And then set the receive date, September 10th, 2019 at 4:40 p.m. with the Board of Supervisors meeting, at which time we would like to award the lowest bid.
I will move 7A.
Second.
Motion by Raddick, second by Ung. Any other discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone
Aye.
opposed? All right, passes 5-0. Moving on to 7B, approval to receive competitive bids on September 10th, 2019 at 4:40 p.m. and award contract to the lowest responsible builder for the Trosper Hoyt Juvenile Detention Kitchen project. I will move that.
Second.
Motion by Raddick, second by Ung. Anything you needed to add?
No, it's been, other than it's been quite a while since we actually thought about doing this project. So we're expecting or anticipating that the cost could come back higher than what we originally anticipated, just due to the natural increases in the time since then. Thank you.
So we had, any other discussion on that? All right, all those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Passes 5-0. Moving fast. So we'll move on to item 9, the Drainage District Association. John, approval, our annual report of Iowa Drainage District Association information item. And if you go to 4:40, I'll have to cut you off.
Pardon me?
I'll have to cut you off at 4:40 because I have a set time if you go beyond.
Okay.
All right.
Understand.
All right.
Let me, well, first of all, introduce myself. John Torbert, Executive Director of the Iowa Drainage District Association. Like to appear before each of my members on an annual basis and bring them up to date on what's going on in the world of drainage that you ought to be concerned about. First thing I would talk about is action that we have taking place right now at the federal level with regards to waters in the United States. Frankly, we thought this issue had been put away, but that is not the case. The Trump administration came out with a new rule in January of this year, and frankly, the results of that rule as to how it impacts drainage are unclear. The federal administration said that what they were seeking to do with the rule is add clarity so that anybody could look at the rule and know if they were covered under Waters of the United States and had to get a Clean Water Act permit for some sort of activity they were going to undertake. If you read certain parts of the rule, you can make the case that we're not covered, that we're exempt. If you read other parts of the rule, you can make the case very clear that we are covered and will have to get Clean Water Act permits, which leaves us up in the air. And if this plays out, potentially what could happen is anytime you want to do a drainage project, you're going to have to involve the Corps of Engineers, and somebody from the Corps is going to have to make a determination either on the phone or by doing a site visit that the project either does or does not need a Clean Water Act permit. So it puts us in limbo with respect to whether this rule impacts us or not. We made public comment to the rule. Public comment has closed. We made public comment basically providing language that would exempt drainage districts very specifically from the coverage of the rule. I can also say that we had very good support from our state friends, including the governor's office, Department of Natural Resources, Department of Agriculture and Land Stewardship, and Department of Transportation. Governor Reynolds did submit a public comment, and in that comment she did raise concerns about drainage and whether drainage was covered or not. I have indications from EPA that they received 700,000 plus comments on the rule. They say they read them all. I don't know. I don't know that ours got read, but I'm pretty sure that when the governor makes a comment, it does get read. So at this point, we're waiting. What is supposed to happen is EPA takes all those comments and formulates a final rule. They will do that when they're ready. And at that point, they'll be sued, no matter what they do. So this is not going to be something that happens tomorrow. Of course, the other possibility exists that we could have a new administration in Washington in January in a year and a half, and the whole process could start over again, depending on what happens with the presidential election. So right now, we're up in the air. We're watching it very closely and trying to make sure that you all don't have to go through another bureaucratic hurdle just to do a drainage project that doesn't really have to exist. So that's a pretty good stopping point, and I'll sit down for a few minutes.
Sounds good. All right, so we're going to move on about 2 seconds early here. We're going to start a public hearing here for a public hearing for First Amendment to indefeasible right to use agreement in the State of Iowa Communications Network here. Glenn, you want to touch on that? We'll open our public hearing.
Glenn Sadovy, Woodbury County Communications, representing the Starcom Executive Board. This is a First Amendment to a current lease that we're leasing fiber optics to the ICN Communications Network from the Iowa Workforce Development Center out to the WIT campus. They've had a 5-year lease for this fiber in the amount of $250. This lease will increase that fee to $275. The original lease did not have any renewal terms, so working with Mr. Whitman, we were able to negotiate and get 3 renewal terms. There'll be automatic renewal terms for 5 years each. They'll be automatic unless we receive notice from them that they want to cancel the lease. That's pretty much it.
Any public comment to be heard on this? All right, well, seeing none, I'll move to close the public hearing.
Second.
Motion by Radig, second by DeWitt. Any further discussion on the item? All right, all in favor of closing the public hearing, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? All right, passes 5-0. Now moving on to B, authorize the chairman to sign the First Amendment of Indefeasible Right of Use Agreement and the State of Iowa Communications Network. I will move that.
Second.
Motion by Raddick, second by Ung. Any discussion on that? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Passes 5-0.
Thank you.
Thank you, Glenn. All right, well, back to John here. You got,
So any questions about where we are with respect to Corps of Engineers and permitting? Okay. A couple of other things I mentioned. First of all, there has been another lawsuit filed on water quality. The good news is we weren't named defendants in this one. This was filed by Citizens for Community Improvement and another group that I had not heard of, which I understand was an outgrowth of people opposed to the Dakota Access Pipeline when it was going through the state of Iowa. And basically they have sued Department of Agriculture and Department of Natural Resources, claiming that there is not enough being done to protect water quality in the state and more should be done with respect to regulations specifically and legislation. I do think, as an aside, that litigation is a horrible way to make public policy, but unfortunately that's sort of the name of the game these days. One of the reasons that Des Moines Water Works was not successful in the lawsuit that they filed against drainage districts was that the judge's opinion, which was correct, that you all as trustees don't have a lot of the authorities that the lawsuit envisioned. You don't have the authority to regulate landowners. You don't have the authority to tell people how to farm. You don't have the authority to order conservation practices put on land. And the judge said, you know, if the authority doesn't exist, the lawsuit shouldn't proceed on that basis. So we're not named in this lawsuit, but again, depending on how it plays out, we could eventually be involved at some point in the solution, if you will. So we'll be watching that very closely. The next thing I will talk about is the legislature and the big question with respect to water quality in the legislature is when they are going to enact the 3/8 cent sales tax for conservation purposes. I've heard next year a number of times, and what we heard this year was it'll be next year. So I don't know when the legislature is going to act. A couple of problems that have to be addressed. First of all, if they do a sales tax increase, it's probably not going to be 3/8 of a cent, it's probably going to be a penny. So you've got more than half of that new money that's sitting out there subject to the appropriations process, and you've got 150 ideas in the legislature on how that should be spent, and the governor's office on top of that, which all have designs on that other 5/8 cent. That will have to be resolved if they move forward on sales tax. The other question about the Waterland Legacy Fund is how the money is distributed. Once the 3/8 cent is authorized, so you're creating revenue, so how do you spend that revenue? The distribution of that money is in statute. It's not in the Constitution. So the distribution can be changed by the legislature at any time. And you've got some legislators who have been around a while that say, you know, I was here when the formula was put together, and there was a lot of hard work and a lot of compromise that went in that formula, and we shouldn't touch a thing. And you've got other legislators that weren't there when the formula was negotiated that say, I'm not going to vote for a tax increase unless the formula is changed. It doesn't do enough for you name it. So they're going to have to figure out how to round up the votes necessary given those question marks with respect to moving forward on the 3/8 cent sales tax increase. There will be discussions taking place this summer and this fall on the distribution formula. Will be part of those discussions. What we were told by legislative leadership in April was that the intent at this point is to move a bill next year as part of an overall tax reform package. So I think what they're trying to do is at least create the appearance on paper that this is revenue neutral, that they're increasing sales taxes, but they're decreasing taxes elsewhere so that they can have something to hang their hat on and say this is really a revenue neutral program, and that was the basis for my vote. Something happening next year would go against common, legislative wisdom, which says you don't do a tax increase in an election year. That would tend to work against it, I think, but these are strange times, and never say never. I guess we'll just have to see. I think everybody knows that if you want to truly make a dent in water quality in this state, it's going to take a lot of money because it's going to take a lot of money to put in conservation practices. These practices are not cheap. Whether you're talking about saturated buffers or wetlands or cover crops or whatever, they all come at a cost to the landowner. And the only way that they're going to happen is if you have state assistance for landowners to make that happen, particularly given today's farm economy. The hope is that they will find a way that we can move forward. They all know that we need more money, but knowing we need more and actually getting to the point of creating the fund are two different issues. The last thing I'll talk about is an internal process that we have going on right now. I had some questions raised by some drainage clerks in our membership earlier this year that are going through reclassifications. And the concern they expressed was the cost involved in publishing all the information that has to be made available when you do a reclassification. And it's a very expensive process, and of course, under law, drainage districts don't create money. The only place that comes from is the landowners. So these publication costs, the landowners are essentially paying a fee to get this information. We think there ought to be a better way to do that and a less costly way to do that. We don't in any way, shape, or form want to lessen the ability of a landowner who's affected to find out how the reclassification affects him or her, but we think there are more effective and more economical ways to do that, and we've got a task force that's working on that right now, hopefully to take a bill to the legislature in January. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Anybody getting any measurements on nitrates and phosphates this year with all the elevated water levels? You probably find that
Yeah,
your
there's
percentages
measurements
are,
taken all the time.
your percentages have to be
Iowa does
quite a bit
measurements.
lower.
Iowa State does monitoring. Yeah, there's monitoring done all the time.
And since the percentage in the water goes down as you go to the mouth of the Gulf there, I mean, we actually dilute it every river and waterway throughout the state.
Right.
Should we actually increase our nitrogen production levels so that we don't dilute the water?
Well, what we've seen, unfortunately, is that when you have very rainy periods as we've had, it tends to wash out the nitrogen in the soil, so the concentrations go up.
Well, but the actual percentage in the water goes down because of
Yes.
the elevated level of water.
Yeah, so there's two ways to look at it, that's correct.
That's all, I just,
Weather plays probably the biggest factor on this issue more than anything else. Nitrate banks in the soil. So if you have bare soil in the spring before crops are planted, and you get a rain event, you're going to have a lot of nitrogen washed out of that soil with a rain event. If you get a rain like we had this morning when crops were actively growing and the crops can use that nitrogen, that nitrate, the impact is much less. And that's one of the reasons cover crops are effective is you never, not never, but you know, the amount of time that you have bare soil is really reduced dramatically. It's a tough issue because you can't control the weather. But if we're going to make progress, it's going to take funds.
all righty. Thanks, John. And anyone else have any questions? All right, thank you.
All right, thank you very much for your time.
Moving on to item 10. Approve Law Enforcement Center Financial Advisor Request for Proposals, document, and seek proposals from interested financial advisors. I'll go ahead and move it.
Second.
Motion by Raddick, second by Ung. Go ahead, Kenny, if you will.
Dennis and I have been working together on this with Goldberg Group and with Joshua's assistance drafted an RFP. We think it's a very good idea to seek financial advisor to assist with terms on a possible law enforcement center and assist with terms and on big capital, major capital projects like this. Requires someone in a professional field that's beyond what normal capital project improvements are, and so this would assist us hopefully in determining some of those factors. And Dennis, if you've got other comments you'd like to make, please do so.
Not really. It is a need that we do get a financial advisor. I did meet with Larry this afternoon for about an hour and a half, and we went through a lot of items, a lot of the funding mechanisms. And I guess he could, you know, if he prefer, he could get up and explain a few things if you have any questions.
Hi, Lawrence Goldberg, Goldberg Group Architects. Thank you for this opportunity. Over the years, the role of financial advisor has grown and separated from the role of a public underwriter. The firms that issue the bonds aren't the guys that make the rules about competing on who issues the bonds anymore. We are financial advisors ourselves, but would not have felt comfortable doing this. It needs to be someone who's had experience with bond issues of this size in Iowa, and there's several that are certainly qualified and interested. The fact is a financial advisor today can help you all not only analyze the financial structure, options, term rates, consequences, and schedule for the undertaking, but frankly can help conduct a public bond sale, unlike a lot of the stuff that happened years ago. We just got through, for instance, on a justice center in Kansas where the FA did a public bond sale. The winner, would you believe, this is in a small community in Kansas, although it was a $20 million undertaking, was Bank of Switzerland, and it was a 30-year financing for 3.08%. So the savings can be substantial. I also want to say that we're asking that they propose their fees, but that they accept the fact that it is a contingent arrangement. In other words, unless or until closing takes place, they don't get paid. And this is often the case, and they understand and accept it. And so the point is, it's a lot of expertise and experience, and we would recommend that you all adopt this route for exploring how best to move forward. Thank you.
Well, a lot of the projections we have would look a lot better with 3%, so.
Yes.
So, any discussion by the board on this?
So what we have is about a 3-week turnaround, Mr. Chairman. It would be issued, if approved, tomorrow, the 21st, and we respectfully propose proposals be received at 10 a.m. Central Savings Time on Tuesday, September 17th, so that we would have a chance to review them and be prepared to discuss them with you all. And then sometime there, you would take them under advisement, and then sometime thereafter would take whatever action you deem appropriate.
Sounds good. All right, any other discussion? All right, all those in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Passes 5-0. Thank you, everyone, on that. Moving on to item 11A, consider approval of plans for project LFM-D5073-97.
This is our grading project south of Anthem. The project is proposed for September 10th letting. I recommend approval of the plans.
I move approval. I'll second. Motion by DeWitt, second by Radig. Any discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Passes 5-0. Moving on to B, approve final pay voucher for project number BRSCO 97-112-6097. I'll move that.
Second.
Motion by Radig, second by Ung. Everything's done and ready to get paid for?
Yes, it's been completed, audited by the Department of Transportation, compliance with federal standards. Everything is ready for final signature.
Sounds good. We had a motion and second on that, right? Yeah, okay. Any questions for the engineer? All right, all those in favor say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Passes 5-0. Move on to C, discussion of proposed gravel road upgrade program. Go ahead and take her away.
All right, I don't know if we can bring up that map for anybody in the crowd who's curious. We've been talking about trying to make some improvements to our gravel roads. We've had a lot of complaints over recent years, and one of the big questions is what has changed? And in going back through years of county records, and this shows up on the memo that accompanied the board agenda request, we've gone from averaging around 170,000 tons of gravel purchased back in the 1980s to where over the last 10 years we've been purchasing a little under 120,000, and the trend in the last 5 has been to only purchase about 100,000 miles or 100,000 tons of gravel per year. During these periods, our income's been relatively static, whether it's property tax basis or road use tax fund. We've been trying to pump more road use tax fund money into it, but basically we're still just treading water and spending the same amount each year, but we end up effectively purchasing less and less. And we notice it when we go out and blade, when we get some fresh gravel on the roads, the guys go out and blade and they're mixing subgrade soils up into the gravel, which makes it look even finer than it should look. Wait to see if she brings the map up. We discussed prioritizing the roads, and we looked at it in the office a number of ways. What we settled on was looking at all our roads with more than a 50 vehicle per day traffic count, or that had a residence, grain bin, cattle operation on, and looked at those roads for being the ones that we would seek to improve and get back some of our gravel road base so that we're getting back to better all-surface roads. We have 938 miles of gravel total and just shy of 64 miles of dirt. The map's up on the wall now. We looked at having through roads like 120th Street where we're paralleling some of our pavements so that heavy ag equipment has the option of not running up and down our paved roads, and they can find a good quality gravel road close to those pavements where they have a parallel route to get to and from town, whether it's just transferring machinery or trying to get crop in by whatever type of equipment they're choosing to use. We haven't integrated bridges into this because there's no, with the program we've been discussing, where we're looking at using urban renewal fund options and additional valuation that's coming on board to help pay for this. We're not looking at slowing down our construction program on bridges. So since 2006, we've taken it down from 125 bridges that had less than 5 years of estimated remaining life or were structurally deficient or functionally obsolete. We're down to 68 now, and we're going to be continuing to lower that trend throughout the 5-year program period. Just for the board's information, we had a comment on this last week in the boardroom on 150th Street between Jewel and Jasper, asking about the bridge in that area that was 3 tons as to whether or not that road would be one of the ones designated for additional gravel base. It is one of the ones, and that bridge is in the fiscal year 2021 program for replacement. So I knew it was on the list, I just couldn't remember which year. But basically we sat down and prioritized the roads, and we came up with 3 classes of roads. We're proposing, I know the memo said initially 766. We've looked a couple over, we've added a couple, I think we're up around 769 right now. We found a couple where we had some gaps in what we wanted to create for a system, and we've added those. We're looking at 101 miles of the gravel roads that we won't see a change on. They'll still receive the same level of maintenance, snow removal, and spot gravel and maintenance that they've got now. Some of the roads with 15 to 30 vehicles a day they aren't seeing the same level of degradation. We don't hear the complaints on them that we do the roads with higher traffic levels. So those roads will continue as they are now, all part of the level A system, all part of getting snow removal on them, and they will see no changes from the type of service that they're seeing today. Then we're proposing to bring our 63.8.9 miles of dirt roads into a level B system under County Ordinance number 17. And we're looking at that system right now. We made some revisions on that, looking about 120 miles, not the 135 that was on the initial map. We found good reasons to drop a couple of the other roads, especially down in the District 4 area, where we hadn't had a chance to have the foreman take a look at that part of the map yet. But we're right around 120 miles of road, so we got 64 miles roughly of dirt, and then 56 miles of gravel roads that would be put in that level B system. The gravel roads that would go into the level B system, we're not saying they'd never get gravel again. We still use those as land access roads, and they may need it from time to time. But we're already not doing snow removal on them in the winter, and we're allowing them to close themselves once adequate snow is built up. But at this point in time, we're not warning people that we're not doing that snow removal. So that'll be one of the goals, is to get that posted. We do that under the process in County Ordinance number 3. That takes a separate resolution by the board. But I wanted to present it as part of the whole strategy that we're looking at for county road improvement. I'll forward the board the latest level B road suggestions. We've got that as a PDF. I didn't get a chance to email it to everybody ahead of the meeting, though.
Well, it seems like some of those you'd still get snow removal because the plow's got to go through one area to get to the other, but.
There are a few of those that we don't, though. I mean, they're able to go if it's a north-south road, we just keep going west and around to the next mile. When there's no residences, no hog confinements, no feeding operations on them, when they're heavily shaded or when they drift in heavily, most of them aren't day one roads anyway, and many of them don't even serve as school bus routes anymore. But they still serve an important purpose for land access. So we can't vacate the roads. We still need them out there to provide necessary service. But on the other hand, they're not getting the same level in the winter. And part of the level B system is that you warn folks at both ends of the mile that you go in there at your own risk.
And you did factor in the school bus routes on all this?
Yes, and even some mail routes where we have some traffic that doesn't look necessarily, it was kind of surprising some of the routes they take in the hills down in the southeast part of the county to get around both with school buses and with mail routes. So, that's where we have 4 very experienced foremen who live in their areas, and they know their roads and their public very well in those areas, and they scrutinize that level B map to get it to the final format. Again, not exactly the one you're seeing now. Some roads were dropped, a couple were added, but we ended up with a lower total down to about 120 miles is where we're at right now. I guess I'm open for questions. This program at the 771 miles, looking at our current prices for gravel, we're looking in that $10 to $11 million range to purchase the material to build up our road bases. We're looking at probably $5 to $7 million to get that trucked into place. We're still investigating both lease and purchase of the trucks to haul that, and possibly doing it with our own staff versus contract trucking. We've got our contract loads that we're taking out, that 18 miles of road that we're doing this year under our construction program using our dime fuel tax. We'll have truck bids in here in the next couple of weeks, and we'll be able to factor those in and be able to look at ownership versus hiring that work done. So we'll have a recommendation in upcoming months. We would look at either purchasing or leasing those out of our current secondary road revenues. We wouldn't be looking at that coming out of the money for the road improvements. I guess with that, I can open up to questions. I know Dennis is best equipped to discuss the financing.
Well, that's where I'm at, because I want to make sure that we keep this thing going, that we just don't let it die out again.
Okay, and the financing part, I don't have the schedule in front of me, but we planned on using $300,000 a year for 10 years out of his budget that he already pledged, and using some cash reserves for this coming fiscal year 2021, around $400,000. I think the following year would be about $100,000 for 21-22, and then the rest would be financed through tax increment financing. And with the tax increment financing, we'd be using basically the CF release for the 10 years, but after you get past, I think it's the 5th year, there'll be enough release that we won't be using all CF release. We'll be using it for other things, as property tax relief or other economic development projects. To do this, I did talk to our TIF attorney this morning a little bit. It's about a 2-month process to get these roads, where in our TIF amendment done, a maximum 2 months. So if we're ready to kind of roll on this, we know where we want to go with it, I believe, is to give possibly next week some action of some type to authorize to go ahead and amend our TIF districts so we can do this. It's a TIF and an urban renewal project. So the people that are outside the TIF area, such as our county roads and our right-of-ways, are non-taxable. So it really didn't affect us a whole lot. It's just made our plan of how we're going to spend the TIF money of the people paying into the TIF district. that's kind of where we're at.
How did you come to those dollar figures for the contributions from reserves?
Okay, I came through that by using, as TIF came off or came on, they would have enough TIF released from CF to cover the cost without using extra reserves such as the first 2 years. If we didn't use reserves there, we'd have to go to debt service and borrow the money. So what we're trying to do is to keep this as small as possible tax effect on the taxpayer by not levying any debt service. It'll all be about $500,000 out of 2 years of cash reserves. A lot of times people underspend their budgets, generally they do. We'll get this back through attrition by not spending their monies. And the revenues, like I said, would be TIF. And after 5 years, we'll have more TIF coming in from CF than we need, so that can be released. And then his $300,000 commitment a year for 10 years.
Do you think we're in a place where we could use more reserves?
Well, after the first 2 years, you really wouldn't have to because we aren't going to use any reserves at all after the first 2 years. If you use more reserves, that could cut back, you know, what we'd have to use of CF money.
That's, I know, so
It'd be enough to take that amount of reserves out, and now still leaves around 15, 16, 17% cash reserves. Our goal is always 22, 23%, or 20%, but logically, I've seen some reports by GFOA, government finance officers, 15 to 17% is sufficient. Because you're getting money coming in the first 3 months, and then the third month, you're getting a lot of your tax dollars in the first half.
and that's where we'd be at with just the first 2 years.
Right.
Okay.
Right. We have to make sure we have enough money to general basic, you know, to pay our bills. And that's what we're trying to leave there for sure. But less effect on the taxpayer. And we're going to have some pretty significant tax base increases coming year when we budget for next year for 2021 because we've had the assessment increases by the city assessor. Today we got this equalization order, which is dramatically increasing again. They're both going to appeal it to see how we can get it back down from what they suggested, but pretty significant. But the key is we're keeping it down from levying a tax county-wide and not taxing all the cities for a rural project. And that's what we're doing. It takes a maximum of 2 months to get the project, you know, the TIF amendment done, bending the plan, and we used Bob Johnson for that. That's pretty simple, pretty easy to do. But that'll be our first step. Get that in, and then we have the treasurer bid it out for $10 million.
That's 81% of the mileage of the gravel roads is in this plan. Is that overshooting what we need to do?
Well, it was a little bit of a surprise when we threw in where all the residences are. And, you know, since that's the center of one family's business, we felt we needed to do those roads as well because many ag owners, they bring a lot of their crop back to where their home place is. So that put those roads up there in importance as well. If I remember right, our first cut, just looking at the 50 vehicle a day roads, we were less than 300 miles. It was the getting the residences in there that pushed us up over. When we looked at doing every road over 25 plus the residences, we were up over 800 miles. So we were even a higher percentage at that point in time. I feel that there's a number of roads out there, and you can probably see where a few of those are with the lighter colored hash marks on them, that they'll still get regular maintenance. They'll still be a part of the level A system because they might be school bus routes, et cetera, but they don't have that hog confinement feeding operation, residence, or cluster of houses on them that really generates that need to improve. I don't think we're overshooting. I think we're getting to the really important roads for the folks out there that use them. We could try different cuts, but we would soon start to lose our route continuity when we start to pull out. If we went, for instance, to a 70 vehicle a day and rode it out, we might lose enough of them in there that are still important links that we need to have that I would be concerned about dropping out. We also added, as I said, we added some back in. When you look at 120th Street, we're pretty much continuous on 120th from Sioux City over to K64. With the tall embankments and narrow shoulders, a lot of folks don't like to run D12 with big ag equipment.
Pretty hilly.
And, pardon?
Pretty hilly.
Pretty hilly and narrow, and a lot of traffic on it that's wanting to pass. And you know, we're trying to make sure that as we look at some of those portions of our system, that we're giving the ag users a place to go, that they've got a good quality gravel that's paralleling those important paved routes. So they do have those options.
And you'd be looking at building base first for the next few
We'd be
years?
looking at reshaping, getting our roads to a reasonable top width. Carroll Avenue right now, for instance, with the damage it took during thaw, is over 45 feet wide. We don't want to try and gravel that edge to edge. We want to make sure that we bring those up. We're going to be inspecting all the culverts underneath these roads before we invest that gravel up on top.
Funny you mentioned that, because that's when I had somebody comment to me last night, said, I hope you're including Carroll Avenue.
Yeah, Carroll you can see is one of the roads between D12 and the county line. And it is a fairly heavily used gravel road up there. It's especially this year with the Highway 75 two-lane detours, a lot of people are using it as a shortcut to Sioux City.
That's what he said was the way to get around the 75 stuff and just get into town anyway.
That's one of the reasons we embargoed it fairly quickly. We didn't bring that one before the board, but we stuck the signs out there and ran a strong bluff.
I think I know a guy who lives on Carroll.
I think you might.
My dad.
It's a little
But that's-
farther south, but
Yeah. But, well, I just want to say thanks for all you're doing to put this together, because I've been out there with you and at least twice and seeing some of the roads and conditions they're in, and something needs to get going.
and I think we've been able to answer the questions of what changed. You know, you look back into the 80s, and there was roughly 200 tons of gravel every year on every road. And when you look at that rate that we hauled in the 1980s compared to the rate that we've been hauling since 2000, there's over 350 miles of road that see effectively nothing each year in comparison. That's roughly a third of our unpaved system every year that isn't getting the attention that we were able to give it years ago. I mean, frankly, back then, gravel was $1 or $1.50 a ton. You know, now we're looking at quite a bit more, including the trucking prices, where we're much more than 10 times that in some of our territories. But it does explain what we've been gradually seeing with this declining condition that we've got out there. And what we are trying to propose here is a way to reverse that. We're probably I would say we're probably the only county in Iowa with an asset that we can utilize under TIF and urban renewal to bring some revenue back to the roads. It's part of what we did when we invested all that money in those roads while they were doing that construction. And you can see how once you get that good gravel base out there, as we did on Allison, 235th, 240th, 225th, how well those roads held up this spring. They were the ones that were hard and in good condition. It's a shame we didn't have more people living out there, but because those were the ones that really came through this spring when we had other roads that were nearing impassability in cases.
So we have to put something in to amend the TIF district.
On this, I guess what we request is to come back next week with action, because this is an information item,
Right.
to proceed with a TIF amendment to incorporate the Board of Supervisors plan here. It'll take about a month and a half, 2 months to come back with the hearings and everything to get this finalized. After that, then we go out for bid on the loan.
Well, I, for one, am ready to do it.
Let's go.
I'd like to see it cut down to about 500 miles, but,
The rural people wouldn't.
right,
Only the ones that live on those other.
right.
500 miles would be.
This also will give you a plan to go out to your rural meetings when you have those 3 meetings out with the rural people. And I think you'll get a very positive response.
So about 20,000 a mile is what your cost estimate's at?
I'd say we're going to be a little closer to 30. We're looking about 2,000 tons per mile on average. And with trucking figured into that, 20,000 would be the low end on the east side of the county. We're going to be paying a little more when we get over the west side of the county. You know, right now putting enough material up on the ground, and I think we can, Ben and I both feel we can do $6 per ton or better. Our bid this year was $6.95 and $7.25 for our gravel. If you remember from the contract going through earlier, that was without trucking. That was just getting it up on top of the ground. We feel with the quantity we're dealing with here, where we're looking at almost 1.7 million tons, we'll be able to, when the contractor doesn't have to keep mobilizing that crushing unit, he can come in and do a lot better job. And we have those reserves in that Little Sioux Park, breezy area that we can get at and utilize those to get the gravel for this system. We did price, I know the board's had comments on looking at quartzite and other materials, quartzite, limestone, et cetera. The bill for our 250 tons of limestone goes through, I think it went through this week. By the time we got it up to the county line, we were running right around $18 a ton, which is more than what it costs to get it to our farthest stockpile from our gravel pits. So we would have to ramp this price up if we went to materials that weren't native to Woodbury County. I'm sure we'll hear some on that as we go around too. You know, we will take every measure that we can to assure that we're getting good quality production and getting material out there that is adequate. The ironic thing is, when you look at the roads that are down in that area of the Missouri River bottom, most of what was gravel that came out of there came out of sand hills. They just went in, dug into a hill. If you guys know where Doug Washburn's place is on K67, there's a sand hill pit that the county used for a number of roads down there in the 70s and 80s that there was no sorting, no crushing, anything done. They just took that material out, dumped it in a truck, dumped it on the roads. And it's kind of a testimony when you get enough base material out there, you can still keep a pretty decent road. With the quality control we're going to be working on with this, I think we should get better than average aggregate out there. So that will be one of our goals as a department. We'll get to work on accumulating the lists so that we can do the resolution for urban renewal. We should be able to extract that from our GIS data and get description of the roads to be included in the program. Because I'm sure it's a written list that they'll need for processing that. We can't just say, look at the map. So do that. Might take more than 1 week though. We'll do it as fast as we can.
Okay.
There's your contract up here. Are you?
Thank you.
You have a comment on the subject? Okay, come on up. Say your name. address.
I'm Vernon Canuck. I live at 4045 150th Street, Correctionville, Iowa. And I do live on gravel. And I just want to let the board know that I appreciate the fact that you're keeping this secondary roads front and center. I think your plan makes logic sense. And I just want to say that I appreciate it that we're getting some attention out here. It was a little bit of a rough spring. That's part of the weather, and we recognize the fact we live on a secondary road, and that's part of it. But I really hope this can move forward and you guys will continue to help us. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, anybody else to be heard on the item? Move on to committee meetings. Jeremy, you still there?
I had a Rolling Hills meeting last week, and we talked about telehealth and psychiatry and whether or not we'll utilize that to an increasing degree in our jail. And so we'll be exploring that as well as the children's mental health system as the rules are being promulgated. So we'll be looking at that over the next few months and having a task force and a series of related meetings as relates to that.
All right.
That's all I have.
Matthew? Rocky?
Nope.
All right. We'll move on to citizen concerns. We do have one of those, right?
Yes, I wanted to speak on behalf of the Tyler project, just to give you an update in regards to the tax project. We've been focusing a lot on that in the last month. So just to give you an overview of what we've done in converting all of the tax database. We went live on the Tyler Encode tax part of the program on the 22nd of July, so we've just been in the system for less than a month now. And I'm happy to say that all of the statements have been printed and all of the statements are expected to be mailed starting Monday. There's still some stuffing and things that are going on that is going to be completed, and the treasurer said that they should be mailing them out on Monday, all from the mail house. The week of the 29th, we spent balancing the old system with the new system. And then the week of that was the week of the 22nd. The week of the 29th, we finished the balancing on Monday and Tuesday. And then we started the tax processing in the auditor's office. It took about a week and a half for the auditor to verify. We balanced every tax district and every value class and all of the credits, so that we can be assured that what was in our former software is what is going to be going out on the tax statements from Encode. The auditor certified the taxes to the treasurer last Tuesday, the 12th, and the treasurer was prepared to do their processing on that date. It took them through the 13th to do their processing to prepare the tax statements for printing. So the printing started last Thursday. I do want to give huge compliments to the IT staff. They went above and beyond to make sure that the statements were printed and prepared the way that the treasurer wanted them to be prepared, and had the printing done today, this morning at 11 o'clock. I confirmed that all the statements had been printed. The singles were delivered to the mail house yesterday, and the larger packets were delivered to the treasurer's office yesterday. So I'm happy of the progress that we've made in just a month to get these statements ready. Next year, we're going to have to figure out a few more things. One of the things that we had to do with the Tyler staff is they actually prepared the files for printing in different PDF little packets of 1,000 parcels per PDF document, so that they can sort them in the treasurer mails out in packets of 13, so if there's an owner that owns 13 or more parcels, we mail them all out together instead of singly. Tyler software doesn't sort them that way, and so we'll be working with the treasurer and the IT department to develop a way to do that for next year's, or if there's potential for outsourcing at that time, but we have a year to prepare for that. Some of the things that you may get questions on from citizens is there is one new thing on the statements. The drainage used to be mailed out separately, and now the drainage is combined on the statement, so they're going to have their parcel and their drainage all on the same statement. The special assessments are going out by themselves, the mobile homes are going out by themselves, and then all the gas and utilities, those are all prepared by themselves. Next year, the treasurer is considering combining the special assessments onto the parcels also. So those are a couple of little changes. Other than that, the format that you'll see on the tax statements is pretty much the same as it always has been. Shows the breakdown of all the different entities that the levies are paid into. We did balance in the auditor's file before it was turned over to the treasurers. Like I said, all the values per district, all the credits per district, military credits, homestead credits. The business property tax credit was imported from the state, so all that information should be accurate. The levies were verified, the levy calculations were verified, and the rollbacks were verified. So I think we've got a really, really good conversion of the tax files moving forward. A couple of things that we still have in the works is we're giving some public access to some of the outside users of Sioux City and some abstractors that have had access to the tax databases. We do have that public access set up. We reviewed it today with both assessors and the treasurer and the auditor's staff and the Tyler conversion specialists to determine if everything was on there that they need to receive and nothing that they shouldn't be seeing at this time. So the public access is set up, and we're going to be working with IT and abstractors in the city to make sure that all the users that have had access to the database has access again. Another thing that we had talked about in the past when we were looking at the project related to the finance side is the public access and board access to some of the finance information. And we are going to be working with Tyler to get that set up. That was kind of not high priority in the beginning, but now we're like slowing down a little bit, so we'll be able to get together some of the things that we haven't had a chance to yet. And that's one of them. We called that citizen transparency, and I did a little demo of it up here of another counties when we were doing our proposals. So you'll be seeing more of that, and if one of you are interested in maybe attending those meetings while we get it all formatted to see what you want to see, you know, you're welcome to have somebody come to those meetings. And then also we're working on work orders and inventory, and that's kind of heavy in building services that they're going to be using a new work order system. And inventory, they've already been loading all the inventory in there. We also work with secondary roads on that a little bit, and I think Mark's looking at that and potentially going to be using the inventory part of the software. But that'll be up and coming. Project accounting is another thing that we'll be formatting, and then we'll be running our budgets through the new software, and they're going to come back here to work with us at budget time, so we'll be able to work with the Tyler consultants at that time. So that's basically the update I wanted to provide. I'm very, very proud of the whole team. It's been a challenge, but it's been very rewarding to see it to come together. And treasurer's staff, as far as everything that they're doing to get the statements out, stuffing, getting everything sorted into the mail house in time, it's very impressive. That's all I have.
All right. Any board concerns? Go ahead.
A couple things. Did anybody else get the call from the Mr. I think it's McCabe from the junior rodeo?
I did.
I'm just going to say, if there's going to be more than 3 or more of us out there, I probably would like to go out there at least one day if we need a public notice, but
I'm not able to go.
What is it? I didn't.
it's admission is free. It's a junior rodeo, and this is one of the points things for the kids basically doing their rodeo stuff and to go to the national. So it's Saturday and Sunday, I think, starts at 9 at the grandstand, and he said admission was free, and I think it's 9 to 3-ish each day. So if nobody else is planning on going, I don't see a problem.
I'll be stuck working.
Second thing, you get to work. Second thing is ATV, UTV stickers will probably be delivered tomorrow. That is not an item that is on the treasurer's expense list yet, so we'll need to probably figure out where we can get the money. I've chatted briefly with Mr. Butler about that. But it's a convenience thing that the DNR stickers come out and are available September 1st for 2020, and so we're making the county stickers available as well, which wouldn't be in effect till 2020, but at least they would be a convenience thing for the people to come and pick all their stickers up early if they choose to do so. But at any rate, the stickers are supposed to be delivered tomorrow, and so we'll be invoiced for them and go from there. Past that, I'm done.
All right, anybody else? Seeing none, we're adjourned.